A while ago, I came across a policy competition and it piqued my interest. It asked, in essence, what's the best policy a government could implement to reward merit? I wondered, what would that look like? So I looked into it, and as I did, I realised I didn't feel comfortable with part of the question. And I felt there was a more ambitious question I could answer, so I ended up answering a slightly different question, which I found more interesting. What is the best policy? What is the political equivalent of the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? What is it? And I found the answer. I found academic research going back decades showing what it is, including up-to-date research that for some reason few had seemed particularly bothered about. It wasn't reported in the UK, and yet it was something so important it was almost inconceivable. In an age of impossible challenges and uncertain outcomes, here was something clear, magical. In the words of reporter Alex Bloomberg, who covered the topic for the Planet Money programme a few years ago, it may be the solution, and I'm only half joking here, to everything wrong in the world. Poverty, crime, the economy, deficit. The solution to all of society's problems. Preschool. So let me explain how preschool can save the world.
1, 2, 3, 4!
It starts with two research projects, the Abecedarian project and the Perry Preschool project, which have spanned decades. These projects both exposed a selected group of especially vulnerable children to a short, intensive period of professional preschool care and saw what happened to them over the years, and what happened is astonishing. The Abecedarian project began in the 1970s and focused on providing preschool intervention to at-risk children in their first 5 years. A groundbreaking aspect was the introduction of a control group, a peer group which did not benefit from preschool, that has allowed researchers to judge the effects of their intervention. I can only scrape at the surface, but I've got some figures to marvel at. Here are some from the Abecedarian project. 45% of girls in the control group who didn't get preschool, getting on for half, had teen pregnancies. In the Abecedarian group, it was 26%, more like a quarter. That's 73% higher in the control group. And think about the impact on the life chances of those girls. As the Nuffield Trust puts it, teenage pregnancy is associated with poorer outcomes for both young parents and their children. Teenage mothers are less likely to finish their education, more likely to bring up their children alone and in poverty, and have a higher risk of mental health problems. Infant mortality rates are 60% higher for babies born to teenage mothers. As children, they're more likely to live in poverty, more likely to have accidents and behavioural problems. 73% higher in the control group. That statistic alone should shock you into noticing there's something going on here. 6% of the non-preschoolers graduated from college. For the Abecedarian children, it was 25%, more than 4 times the number. Think of the increased life chances, increased earning potential, all the increased opportunities, and those possibilities were enhanced by the discovery that Abecedarian children had significantly higher IQs. There were also greatly increased health outcomes and decisions. A previous scheme, the Perry Preschool project in Michigan in the early 1960s, was even more modest in its scope, just 2 years of preschool, 2.5 hours a day, plus a weekly home visit promoting parental engagement. By the age of 50, more than 30% of those who didn't get preschool had a conviction. For the Perry kids, it was 7%. Again, a difference of more than 4 times. Of those crimes, the rate for felonies, convictions for violent crimes with a sentence of more than 1 year, was more than double in the control group, more than 100% higher for the ones who didn't get preschool. Taking the cumulative rate for violent felonies, it was 0.93 in the control group and 0.17 in the Perry group, more than 5 times higher. A quarter of the control group had violent felony convictions. For the Perry group, it was 1 in 30. If a Perry man went to prison, he served on average 3 years less than the non-preschooler. For less serious offences, misdemeanours, a convicted Perry man served on average 109 fewer days in jail. In terms of work, the Perry group had an employment rate at over 60% compared to 40% for the control group. In one 15-year period, the Perry group earned on average $180,000 more than the control group. With lifestyle, there were better health outcomes, better lifestyle choices in terms of nutrition and exercise. Both men and women had higher executive functioning, decision-making skills, and higher socio-emotional skills. They were better equipped to face the world, engage with it, and contribute to it. And all that from some preschool costing under $14,000 per year. But the benefits don't stop there. They radiated out to their families, stretched into future generations. The researchers have followed the people who went through these programs for decades, all the while comparing how they got on with people from identical backgrounds. Their brothers and sisters were more likely to graduate from regular high school and be employed, and their brothers were more likely never to be arrested or be addicts. The numbers can't convey how important this is, how many lives were enhanced by preventing the criminalisation through arrest and addiction of siblings, how many fulfilled lives because a brother or sister had some preschool. For the children of those who took part in the Perry Project, their likelihood of never being suspended from school was more than 30% higher than the children of similar people who didn't go through the programme. This is the next generation, the children, and it's the effect of just one parent going through the programme. 30 percentage points lower chance of being suspended from school. So often the entry point for damaging life events. There was a similar difference when it came to having a high school diploma and being employed. More than 30% higher for the children of those who took part in the Perry programme. Leaving aside the impact on improved lives and better life choices, think of the impact on the economy if that was scaled up to the entire workforce. More than 30% higher chance of having a high school diploma and being employed. And for women who had a parent who was in the Perry programme, they had a much higher likelihood of graduating from high school without a suspension and being able to find work. Now this next one is quite homed in. For the sons of Perry dads, fathers who'd done the preschool, 8% of those sons were employed college graduates. For the control group, it wasn't so rosy. None at all were college graduates in work. There's an infinity of opportunity represented by that single number. 8% employed college graduates versus none at all. And a wider figure. For all children of a Perry parent, for them, there was around 25% chance of being employed with some college experience. For the control group, again, none at all. These figures aren't just impressive, they're astonishing, jaw-dropping, grab you by the lapels important. 25% compared to zero in the children of people whose parent, one parent, had a couple of years of professional preschool. How much more convincing could anyone need? This is the single most important policy provision there is. But there is more. The children of Perry participants had a 26% higher rate for full-time employment or self-employment. Sons of Perry kids were 21% less likely to have been arrested. When you think how important getting arrested is for the first time as a milestone in life, 21% less likely. And now perhaps a crucial indicator, the children of the preschool children were 3 times as likely to grow up in a stable 2-parent environment to the age of 18 than their contemporaries. 3 times. And we can break that down even more. For the sons of those who took part in the Perry Project, it was 15 times more likely they would grow up in a stable 2-parent environment from a short period of preschool for one parent. The reason this time in a child's life is so crucial seems to be down to brain development. The brain is 80% developed by 3 years old. It overdevelops, ready for whatever stimulation life throws at it. For that reason, educational philanthropist George Kaiser says, sensory stimulation at the earliest possible point in life is the most important thing we can do to provide equal opportunity in our society. In the light of all that, it's time to review how the UK is doing, because levelling up starts with this. The figures I have, that anyone has, are pre-COVID and the devastating impact that had on preschool outside the home. For that reason, these figures are what we'll be aiming to get back to, not where we're at. Onto some charts. These compare UK performance in a number of key areas with those of our counterparts. The stats are from the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Development and Cooperation, a group of 38 leading economies. And let's start with some really good news. Some apparently really good news. Childcare and preschool enrolment rates for ages 3 to 5. Before the pandemic in the UK, these were at 100%, similar to France, way ahead of the EU and the OECD average. So in this at least, the UK was leading the world. It doesn't get better than 100%. Let's see. The next chart is a counterpart to that. It's percentage of children under 3 enrolled in early childhood education and care. Not so good. This one was at a touch over 30% for the UK, less than a third of the 3 to 5 age range we just looked at, in line with EU and OECD averages, way behind Scandinavian countries. Denmark's enrolment rate for under 3s was more than double that of the UK. And remember why this is important. The brain is growing like crazy at that age, 80% developed by the age of 3. Professional preschool is proven to have a crucial role in that development. The next chart breaks this down further, those enrolment rates for under 3s based on income levels. The international disparity starts to look even more stark. Start by looking at Denmark, leading the field. Their overall rate is just over 70%. That breaks down into around 74% for higher income levels, 64% for the bottom bracket. Compared to that, the UK rate isn't just shameful overall, it's even worse broken down by income. The overall UK rate is just at 30%. The top income bracket manages 46%, the middle bracket is around the average of 30%, but the bottom bracket is under 20%. Those are the children shown by the Perry and Abecedarian projects to most benefit, to hugely benefit, and the lives of those around them and the generations to follow. That 19% enrolment is substantially less than a third of that for the same income bracket in Denmark. It's pretty bad. It's really bad. Equivalent data for 3 to 5-year-olds isn't put forward, so we can't compare it, but given we saw from the first chart the overall rate is 100%, it probably wouldn't be very informative anyway. The next chart is the average number of hours in preschool for under 3s. Again, for some reason, a similar figure for 3 to 5-year-olds isn't given. That may be more informative. It's all very well having a 100% enrolment rate, but how useful that is depends on the hours those kids are getting. For under 3s, it's another clear fail for the UK. Not only compared to Scandinavia, Danish under 3s get just shy of double the hours of professional preschool the Brits do. It's also substantially less than the EU and OECD averages. They're at 11 hours more per child per week than the UK. Next, public spending on early childhood education and care. This is shown as a percentage of GDP, gross domestic product, the total amount of goods and services produced in an economy in a year, the size of that economy for the year. The chart's a bit of a mishmash down to the way different countries compile their figures. Not every country breaks them down into under 3s and over 3s, but there are some very clear outcomes. Overall, the UK comes out adequately, in line with EU and OECD averages. But who wants to be adequate when it's about something as crucial to human development as this? Shouldn't the UK want to be at the front of the field like Scandinavia and France, all spending more than double the amount the UK does? And that overall UK figure hides something more troubling. If you look at the purple and orange bits on the bar graph, they represent different spending on under 3s and over 3s. The over 3s are orange and the under 3s purple. The greys are where there isn't a breakdown available. Look how much the UK spends on those crucial years of brain development, vital to adult thriving, a fraction of the amount they spend on over 3s. 0.1% of GDP compared to 0.6% for over 3s. France spends 6 times as much on under 3s. Norway, 7 times. Sweden, 11 times. It's shocking. I urge you to be shocked. Obviously, showing a percentage of GDP means actual spending depends on the size of the economy. All the economies I just talked about are advanced ones, so ought to be pretty comparable. But just to be sure, let's look at public spending another way in terms of purchasing power parity. That's the actual amount spent adjusted for differing local costs and exchange rates. How do we do when things are shown on equal terms? Worse. Looking at the overall figure, the UK is outclassed by EU and OECD averages, both those groups spending an average of more than 20% more. And keep in mind, these figures represent a time when the UK was included in EU figures as a leading EU economy. The UK's low spending and engagement drags down the EU figures. In future, the gap will show even wider. For public spending at PPP, Scandinavia spends more than double overall. I won't stretch your patience by breaking that down into under 3s and over 3s, but just so you know, in Sweden, they spend 15 times as much on under 3s as in the UK. Now, I'm sorry for so many numbers, and they're not finished, but It's important I show you exactly where we're at, or where we were at before the pandemic, and we weren't in a great place. From public spending on childcare to what parents have to pay, the more they have to pay, the harder it is for them to justify or be able to spend. There are other calls on the money. Maybe a parent will just have to stay home instead. The next chart shows the cost for keeping 2 children under 3 in childcare, and the UK is far ahead of the world in this. Unfortunately, it's one of those races where you want to come last. The chart shows 3 things: the fees as a percentage of a gross annual salary, that's blue, then for a household with 2 earners, that's orange, and finally the percentage of household income in that 2-earner home after taxes and benefits are taken into account. Childcare for 2 children costs around 2/3 of an average annual salary in the UK. You don't have to think long about all the other costs a family faces. 2/3 of an average annual salary for childcare. For the average 2-income home, that comes down to a still ludicrously unaffordable 55%, more than half. Once taxes and benefits are taken into account, with that household, we're down to just a wholly unrealistic 40%. There's no greater indication that the UK, in terms of government policy, does not value childcare for under 3s, does not seem to value giving their children the best start in life they can have. Judge how other countries see it by looking at the other countries on the chart. All those numbers for all those countries are at a fraction of the UK level. Now to a figure that's been hugely impacted by the pandemic, so whatever this shows, the current reality is inevitably a lot worse. Informal childcare, family and friends. You've seen how prohibitive childcare costs in the UK have been, so it's no wonder people are dragged in to lend a hand informally. Those people probably have other things to do. Economically productive things, some of them, but the key thing here is informal childcare is no substitute for professional childcare. Instilling the seeds for success in tiny beings is skilled work. Between 35% and 40% of all under 5s in the UK experience informal childcare in a week. This is another one of those where a high number is bad. It's higher than the OECD generally, which is at 25 to 30%. EU as a whole isn't far off, but look at Sweden and Denmark, barely anything. France, around half the UK rates. Childcare isn't simply somewhere to park the kids while parents get on with other things. It's crucial to the development of human life. And that, good news, the end of the numbers. And a good time to recap them. 26% versus 45% for teen pregnancy. 300% higher college graduation rate. Significantly higher IQ. Greatly increased health outcomes and decisions. Non-preschoolers had a more than 4 times higher rate for criminal convictions. For violent crime, more than double the rate. 1 in 30 preschoolers had a violent felony conviction. A quarter of the non-preschoolers did. Preschoolers who later went to prison served an average of 3 fewer years. Preschoolers who committed misdemeanours served an average 109 fewer days in jail. Preschooler adult employment rate was over 60%. For the rest, it was 40%. $180,000 in higher earnings over a 15-year period. Better health outcomes, better lifestyle choices. Higher executive functioning, higher decision-making skills, higher socio-emotional skills. Brothers and sisters more likely to graduate from regular high school and be employed. Brothers more likely never to be arrested or be addicts. For their children, 30% higher likelihood of never being suspended from school. For their children, 30% higher likelihood of having a high school diploma and being employed. 8% of sons of preschooler fathers employed college graduates compared to none at all. A quarter of their children were employed with some college experience, for the rest, none at all. For their children, a 26% higher rate for full-time employment or self-employment. For their children, 21% less likelihood of being arrested. Their children, 3 times more likely to grow up in a stable 2-parent home. The sons of fathers who experienced preschool, 15 times more likely to grow up in a stable 2-parent home. A lot there, but come on, it was worth a recap. Now, I said earlier that prohibitively high UK preschool costs showed the British government didn't value it as something that would benefit everyone. That wasn't quite true, because there's one set of parents for whom it's not quite as prohibitive. Single parents. For them, it's a more manageable 23% of net household income to keep 2 children in childcare, rather than 41% of net household income for a 2-parent family. Now that shows someone in government understands the importance of preschool for getting the best start in life. It's just not considered a right for all. And while 23% sounds more affordable than 41%, it still doesn't sound affordable, especially not when compared with President Biden's American Families Plan.
We need. American Families Plan will provide access to quality, affordable childcare. We guarantee what I'm proposing in legislation, we guarantee that low and middle income families will pay no more than 7% of their income for high-quality care for children up to the age of 5. The most hard-pressed working families won't have to spend a dime. Third,
he gets it. So even the best subsidised Brits will pay more than 3 times what Americans will pay, and the best subsidised Americans pay nothing at all. This is all about the impact on children and the adults they become. It clearly pays for itself many times over, so touting short-term economic benefits shouldn't be necessary, but there is a huge one. Women's participation in the economy is relatively low in the UK. If women released from informal childcare went into the economy at the level they do in Scandinavia, that would add an estimated £180 billion to the economy every year. Think of that as a bonus. Now, it's a lot to take in, but the message is clear. There are references to everything in the notes, so you can see where everything I've said comes from, and it's peer-reviewed academic sources. And now you've watched this, there may be a few more people out there wondering, why on earth don't they do something about this, clearly the single most important policy issue there is?
1, 2,